What's up mga rational animal and welcome back to my channel. This is me again, Sir Antone, and for today's vlog, may sasagutin tayong isang napakagandang tanong galing sa isang matalinong tao, galing sa isang pilosopo. So, this question is coming from Sir Mr. Ian Miranda. So, shout out kay Sir Miranda. So, pero bago ang lahat, wag mong kalimutang mag-like and subscribe and ring the bell down there para updated ka sa mga bagong videos na aking i-upload. Pwede mo na rin i-share yung videos natin para sa ibang tao rin. And please follow also my Facebook page, June Michael Antone. So, wag na natin patagalin pa. Simulan na natin ang tanong at diskusyon. So, in 3, 2, 1. Now, the question of Sir Mr. Ian Miranda is this. All of us are born essentially with similar brain accordingly, and we have at least the same configuration and potential for mastery. Why is it that in history, only few people who have realized this potential and power as a human person? Now, bago ko sagutin yung tanong, let us clarify first the point, kasi this is an ongoing debate between the rationalism and the empiricism's contention of knowledge. This topic is actually related to the epistemology, and this is a very long discussion. But let me just point out some important factors that would answer to this question. Now, the idea that all of us have essentially similar brain is actually rooted on the rationalist's perspective of the human person, by saying that all of us are rational animals. We are all rational beings and we have essential similar brain. That is why we might have the same capacity and potential for intellectual mastery. Now, one of the factors why only few people in history have realized this power is this: the lack of material resources. The lack of material resources. I would always say that in as much as we have this capacity, intellectual capacity as a rational person, our economic or material resources outside of us will actually help us in the nourishment of this intellectual capacity. Kasi, our resources play a vital role in enriching or enhancing our intellectual development. Now, matanong ko lang, what learning, for instance, would you expect from a boy who grew up in a jungle? O, diba? What learning would you expect from a person who cannot afford to study because of poverty? What learning would you expect from a person who is deprived from basic education because of poverty in life? Now, if we go back to history as an example, we may find out that in the history of humanity, some people were actually civilized or were advanced when it comes to intellectual development. That is basically because their civilization is also ahead compared to others. You know that? In other words, they bloom when it comes to civilization. And we know that in history, intellectual development of people in a civilized world plays a significant role in the development of their civilization. So, masasabi nga nila na may ibang tao na civilized sila kasi, they have a lot of resources. They have enough or sufficient resources or economic and material resources to develop schools, to develop their social and educational system as a civilized society. On the other hand, there were some nations, or there were some societies who failed to do so because of the lack of resources. Another example is coming from our very own experiences as Filipinos. Not all developed their intellectual gift as human beings, as rational animals, because not all is also given equal opportunity to go to a formal education. Hindi lahat kasi nakapag-aral. And we know that one of the common factors why there are some people who cannot go to school is the lack of material resources. Dahil sa kahirapan. And ako mismo, I can testify to that. Because I also came from a poor family and I have known a lot of people na mga matalino. Actually, makikita kayong potential sa kanila. Ngunit, nahirapan silang makapag-aral. Lalo na nung unang panahon na sobrang mahal yung tuition, sobrang expensive to go to college, to go to formal education. Naswerte tayo ngayon dahil libre yung edukasyon, libre yung kolehiyo. So, ayun, our lack of economic resources can also hinder our intellectual development. Although this is not 100% or total, no, this is not absolute. Kasi hindi naman lahat ng mahihirap we're not able to learn really and master the intellectual development. Marami akong nakilala din na galing sa mga mahihirap na pamilya, but they excel compared to others. So hindi naman lahat. And there are other factors too. So para sa akin, that's one of the factors. Kasi some people are deprived of formal education because of the lack of economic resources. Now, the second one is social environmental factors. Now, we know that all of us have this gift of intellect in us, but only few who were nourished because of social constraints, no, because of our social environment. Now, to give you an example is this. In history, especially let me go back to ancient Egypt, ancient Egyptian civilization, they have this so-called pyramid social classes in which the slaves do not have the right to go to school. Only those people who come from higher status can go to formal education. You know that? So that is why the slaves would remain slaves. They would not develop their intellectual capacity or mastery because they are deprived. They are socially deprived from formal education. Diba? Another one is, in history, we know some of the patriarchal societies na women were not given equal opportunity to study with a formal school. So that's why women were taught how to do household living, household works rather. So women were taught to do the work of a mother. So we know that in history. So that is why only men in history excel. That's reality in patriarchal societies before. So although this was changed later on, as we have given also equal opportunities to women. So ayan, environmental factors play also a significant role in developing or mastering our intellectual capacity. There's a saying that says, it takes a whole village to educate a child. That is why environmental factors is a great element of learning. That's why sinasabi nila choice of school will always matter. Kasi yung development natin, I believe na yung development natin depends on how we were trained. Ako for instance, would I know much about philosophy if I chose to become an engineer, if I chose to become a physician? Diba? Hindi. Since I chose to study in the seminary and was trained by philosophers, was trained by this kind of school, then I became who and what I am right now. Diba? That is why depending on how we were trained in our social environment, then it plays also a significant factors in our intellectual mastery. Diba? According to two famous and well-noted sociologists, George Herbert Mead and Vygotsky, they would always say that social interaction could really help us in our learning. You know that our interaction with the world, with the society, with our family, with our school, and with everyone whom we encounter socially in our life would actually teach us a lot of things. That's why environmental factors can also be a greater factor of why some people fail to develop their intellectual mastery as a person or as a rational being. So now, number 3 factor is this: the will of freedom. So this is coming from, of course, from the existentialist philosophers, by saying that choice yun ng tao. May iba dyan na alam naman nila na mayroon silang potential to develop their mastery. May iba dyan na may enough resources and they were living in a kind of environment wherein they could actually develop more of their potentials, but they chose to remain low when it comes to the intellectual development. Choice nila. So, iba't iba kasi yung choices and preferences ng tao eh. And dito yun papasok yung sinasabi ni Gardner that we have different multiple intelligences. Kasi part anin yun sa preferences ng tao, yung pagka-diverse ng ating multiple intelligences. Although this is some of these factors are hereditary. According to Jean-Paul Sartre, man is condemned to be free, and that freedom within us is absolute. So we can always choose whether to develop or master our intellectual gift or not. We can always choose whether to strive hard to achieve academic or intellectual competence or not. It's up to us. That is why dito rin papasok yung the field of education, yung learning sa field of education. There are some students who actually matalino sila, may potential sila, but they do not like to listen to the teacher's discussions. They do not like to learn. So wala nang magagawa si teacher niyan kasi may choice ka eh, whether to learn or not. Diba? That's why I would always say that learning is also a matter of choice. It's also a matter of freedom. Diba? And the fourth and the last factor for me is that only few people realize the potential or the capacity for intellectual mastery because they forget who they really are. Nowadays, a lot of people pretend to be someone else. A lot of people get away from the real sense. A lot of people forget the real essence as a human being. They do not realize their power. They lack basic self-examination, basic self-reflection, and lack of, lack of basic self-examination and self-reflection will lead us towards not knowing ourselves, not knowing our intellectual gifts, not knowing our strength and weaknesses as a person. So that is why forgetting our essential, our real power as a human person is one of the factors. Kasi other people chose to focus their existence on other matters, especially right now. There are a lot of students right now na they will choose a course because they believe that this course can give them a lot or huge income, capital or money. That's why sometimes we forget what is essential because of capital. No? That is why I am very happy right now as a philosophy and a social science teacher with the new subject. This is coming from the new CHED curriculum, the GEUS course, or the General Education Understanding the Self course. Why? Because this subject really aimed to help students to understand the self in matters of academics, and most especially in matters of their very own self. It aims to lead them towards understanding the holistic, the real self, the real who they are as a person. So it will actually lead them towards the idea of knowing and living their real potentials and intellectual capacity as a human person. So I just hoped that as we realize our real power, our real essence as a human being, that we are all rational animals, we would also make use of this potential for the common good of the humanity. The moral lesson that we can get from this particular discussion is that di mo talaga masasabi sa isang tao na bobo siya. Kasi all of us are gifted with this intellect. Diba? Kaya lang, depende na din sa choice natin yan. And I know that we can always choose whether to develop this gift or not. Diba? Nasa sa atin na yon. Ako as a person and as a teacher, I always believe na wala joy bugo sa kalibutan. No? Everyone has the chance to develop their intellect, and everyone should be given equal opportunity to develop their intellectual capacity as human beings, as rational animals. Diba? So we should develop this rationality that we have as a human person. Munang ikaw, kung naglisod na ka sa imong module din ha, naglisod na ka kayo sa imong academics din ha, okay lang na. Keep on learning. Keep telling yourself that you are still growing. Dili man kabugo, no? Siguro there are some people na medyo slow learners sila, but it doesn't mean that they will not learn. Time will come, ma-develop pa rin. Depende kasi yan sa kung paano natin i-develop yung gift, yung intellectual gift natin as rational animals, di ba? So, keep learning, keep moving forward. Don't forget to tell yourself that you have the power to learn. You have the power to rationalize. And most importantly, you have the power to understand the world. Even God nga dili nato makita. Much more, di ba? Masabtan man ganit nato ang Ginoo. Nakailahan magyan nato ang Ginoo nga dili nato makita. Much more ang atong academic sa eskwelahan na naara sa libro na mapwede natong mahibalaan kahit sa unsang paagi, di ba? You have the power. This is Sir John Michael Antone, and I am telling you, your intellect is one of your greatest powers in this life. God bless you.